You'll have to excuse the rather provocative titling of this video. I try to stay fairly political neutral. However, we know it's true. The Brexiteers and those negotiating and advocating for Brexit on the stage in regards to the protocol have not really been behaving very well. And I thought I'd comment on that. I talk a lot about behaviours in negotiations, and I don't just do that because I find it professionally distasteful to be in a negotiation where people are behaving badly. I mean, that is true, but also because behaviour itself is negotiation, it is communication. And if you're behaving badly, then you're a poor communicator. If you're a poor communicator, then you're a poor negotiator. Those are the linkages. So for anyone who wants to be successful at negotiation, you cannot behave badly. And I apply behavior in a very broad definition of that term. It's not just about actions, verbal or body-wise. It's also about how you approach issues, how you deal with problems, how you communicate, how you do your analysis. All of that is a form of behaviour or comes out in behaviour. So this particular week, the very exciting news is that the showdown between the UK government and the EU on the Northern Ireland Protocol has come to a bit of a dramatic head. So let's talk a little bit more about that. So these kinds of negotiations are pretty much unprecedented, really. You don't get to see them in the public eye. But what is always true, and even more so when it comes to political style negotiations, that perception is just as important as substance. Now, I try not to do that when I'm coaching people in how to do negotiation. I try to get them to focus on the substance. But at the end of the day, perception is substance in a way. People will perceive you as trustworthy or not. And you can make really good arguments, you can have really good analysis, but if the perception of you is dishonest and untrustworthy, you're going to struggle to get those arguments across. So with that in mind, bad behavior is never a winning strategy in any negotiation, full stop. Now, I know some people might point to the likes of Trump as a person who behaved exceedingly badly and claims to be a negotiator. He is not any kind of negotiator by anybody's reasonable standards. He is a bully. That is what he is. So that is his negotiation style. He thinks he's a negotiator, but actually he's just a bully. So that doesn't achieve anything meaningful in many ways. So that's not really any kind of example of bad behavior succeeding. Can people sometimes succeed by doing bad things? Yeah, sure. That's what terrorism is, in a way. You're negotiating for your political end by doing something rather despicable. But that's not a long-term strategy to succeeding at a negotiation. And to be honest, I'm not really going to focus on that sort of thing. I'm going to talk about stuff that's more meaningful, actually trying to achieve proper, meaningful outcomes. So when it comes to negotiating in any kind of big business or political context, you do actually need to occupy the high ground. And people might find that a bit strange to bring morality into perhaps even a business negotiation, but that is absolutely true. To win your argument, it's not just about the substance. It is the perception that people can struggle to argue against you because they subconsciously perhaps feel you occupy the high ground. So that is crucial in any negotiation, particularly high stakes one. You've got to appear as the individual or the organization that occupies the high ground because it strengthens your position. It's as simple as that. Without that, your arguments lack weight. So of course that then means behavior not only helps you to occupy the high. I mean, your arguments could be rubbish. You could be, making complete bogus, emotive, garbage argument. But if the perception is that you behave well and that you occupy the moral high ground, that will carry weight. Even your rubbish arguments can potentially carry weight if presented in the right way. So behaviour is crucial, and the behaviour is quite often links to the strength of your position. If you know you've got good arguments, they're absolutely solid, unshakable, and that you're behaving well, you're not throwing a tantrum or anything like that, then that will just come across. And that will strengthen any proposal you make, any argument you make. So quite often when anyone's behaving badly in a negotiation, that betrays weakness. They're getting emotive, and they might be, raising their voice, trying to make their argument more forceful, as if by being louder that makes it more forceful. It doesn't work, not in any kind of professional negotiation. So this is why perception can be key. You can trick people into thinking you're in a stronger position by just looking like that confident person, making a proposal fully in the belief that you've got a strong argument. And that strengthens your position, behaving in that way, like a decent, confident, professional person. You may not, you may be bluffing, but that behavior does strengthen your position. So of course, that leads me to my final point here, which is what is better than winning? Well, it's actually making the other side think they've won when they haven't. And I've done this myself in various negotiations. I've got my checklist of things that I wanted to secure in that negotiation. And sometimes you can alter people's perceptions. So what I mean by that is that you can propose your idea in a way, and that can be immediately rejected. The other side says, no, can't have that. But there's various ways that you can make that idea grow in their mind, particularly if your negotiations are held over several meetings over a period of time. And there's various little strategies, little tricks you can use to just get them to absorb that idea over time. And what can happen, and has happened to me, is that the other side, at a later point, has then come back and proposed my own idea back to me as if it was their idea. And that's great. When you've done that, you've made them think they've won a concession from you, that you've compromised to them, when really you've ticked a little bit on your list of that's what I want. And they're now proposing to me what I want. Absolutely brilliant when that happens. So perception can be crucial, and making the other side think they have won when really you've ticked off everything you have, you've obtained everything you wanted, is a superb position to be in. And quite frankly, it's pretty obvious that the EU did this to the UK with the original withdrawal agreement and Northern Ireland protocol. They got everything they wanted, and the likes of Boris Johnson did run around yelling, we've got an up and ready deal and so on. So he thought he had won. But actually, the reality is very clear that the EU had won. This is why we're, a couple of years later, talking about the protocol. The likes of Johnson and Lord Frost have suddenly realised they didn't win. So they're having to go back. They're having to renegotiate. But that's not from a strong position. When you have signed the agreement, it's very hard to row back on it. You can only do so if the other side consents to you doing so. And in this case, the EU has no legal obligation to consent to anything that the UK has won. Once both the UK and the EU have signed on the dotted line. So anything the EU does now, they do it because they feel generous or it's a courtesy. They don't actually have to do anything. That's the position they are in. So what does this mean in terms of, how the Brexit negotiations are behaving? This is particularly applicable to Lord Frost and what he's been doing this week. Well, throughout this entire run-up to this week, he has been making a lot of unsubstantiated claims, particularly about the impact the protocol has had. And there are no doubt there are difficulties. But it's not hard to make the argument that all the difficulties with the protocol are purely down to UK government not wishing to implement them or not implementing them properly. So that doesn't mean the protocol itself doesn't work. It's unproven, essentially, because it wasn't ever implemented in the first place to prove it didn't work, if you like. So Lord Frost is not in a strong position here. He's made a lot of unsubstantiated claims, and those claims may look good in the media, in the press, and so on. But for EU negotiators who will very much focus on the detail, on the substance, these remain unsubstantiated claims, and they're not emotive. They don't respond in the way of where you just say that's bad. They'll just say, okay, give us examples, give us proof. Let us work with that. That is how those types of negotiators work. So sort of going very much into the public eye with a lot of these claims has done an awful lot to undermine Lord Frost's credibility, I'm afraid, as a negotiator in terms of representing the UK's position. And he kind of made the situation worse for himself, really, in a way. On Tuesday, he went to Portugal, he did a speech, and at that speech, he basically threw out this proposal of the UK going to write an alternative version of the Northern Ireland Protocol. And we submitted it to the EU. Well, that's the night before the EU are meant to be giving the UK their substantive proposals. Now, this is an obvious tactic, try and throw things at people at the last minute. Maybe it works against amateurs, it doesn't work against professionals. Furthermore, it's exceedingly poor behaviour. It is a professional courtesy between negotiators, if you like, that you give them at least a week to consider any proposals that you want them to respond to before you get to the meeting. So come the Wednesday morning when the EU officials travelled to London to give their substantive proposals, they may well have had so what do you think of the Lord Frost proposals? And they're just going to be giving, we've not had time to consider it, shrug of the shoulders. Simply put, that means not going to bother, really. You didn't give us time, no way you're going to get a substantive answer. Here you go, here's, as promised, our substantive proposal. This is the key one on the table, not things submitted at the 11th hour. That's how these things work. So what Lord Frost has done has been a publicity stunt. It's not actually anything of substance. And anyone with any professional knowledge of this area would have very much recognised that and recognised the poor behaviour that's going on there. Now, I'm going to talk about something a little bit more complicated here when it comes to negotiations. And that is the concept of adherence to principles. We'll do that first, and then I'll go and talk about reframing principles in any negotiation. In this particular case, the Northern Ireland Protocol isn't the principle. The Northern Ireland Protocol is the means, the tool to deliver the principle. The principle that both the UK government and the EU are signed up to is that peace in Northern Ireland must be maintained. That is the key principle. Anything outside of that is secondary or implementation. So whenever you're negotiating something with someone, and you're negotiating on a topic that directly impacts a principle, you must occupy the high ground and demonstrate adherence to those principles. We want to maintain peace in Northern Ireland, however, there's a few issues about implementation that we just need to fix. That sort of message. Or you need to do a very good job of proving whatever the topic you are negotiating is contrary to those principles. So the protocol has been written very much with that principle in mind, the principle of peace in Northern Ireland. So to turn round and to seek to rewrite it, you have to really prove that as it is, it undermines the principle. So what you have to do is you have to reframe the perception of the other side of those principles. So let me use a slightly simpler argument to explain how this looks. Recently, I'm supporting someone who's going through a divorce. Moral support, not negotiation support, I should add. And one of the things that happened when they were doing the divorce settlement between the lawyers, they agreed on the principle of a 50-50 split, in their assets, which I believe fairly standard in divorce proceedings. And their lawyers proceeded on the basis of that, that principle. So they went and calculated all the assets, and then they agreed a sum that represented 50-50 of the combined assets within the scope of that, divorce settlement. But then the lawyers on one side said, oh, you know what, I don't think this is fair. I think I can do a little bit better here. They tried to negotiate a little bit, trying to secure a better outcome for their client, which is, of course, supposedly what they're meant to do. So they made a proposal to the other side, and they said, "Oh, we don't think this is fair. We think this is, that the other my client could do better. Let's go for a reduction in that 50-50 by I think it was about a few £1,000, whatever it was, the actual figure." And they got a very strong rejection back from the other side. And the rejection from the other side was very much along the lines of, both our clients have agreed on 50-50. That figure that previously agreed is 50-50. What you have just proposed is in complete contradiction to that principle. So obviously, the other lawyers have stuck rigidly to the terms of the agreement. And so when you have a principle, you have a red line in some ways. You don't have tradables unless you can reframe those principles. So staying on that divorce theme, if that first lawyer has said, on paper, this represents 50-50. However, in practice, my client has all these additional costs that your client will not have in order to realize this 50-50. Therefore, in order to make sure that the principle of 50-50 is adhered to, these costs should be borne in mind and adjustment made to reflect them. Something along those lines. And so that way, you're reframing that principle of, well, that figure is not actually 50-50 when you take account of these other things. That is how you reframe a principle and how you get the other side to move off it. If you do not do that, the other side will not only not move their position, they will get very angry at what they perceive as you undermining an agreed principle. And this is very much the case when it comes to the Northern Ireland Protocol. The EU and certainly the Republic of Ireland very much feel that the UK is reneging on the principle. That they do not want to adhere to the key principle of peace in Ireland. They're trying to stir up trouble for their own political end. And there's a strong argument for this, because when you analyse what Lord Frost has supposedly said about the Northern Ireland Protocol, actually a lot of his proposals are about changing the withdrawal agreement. So this is seen as a backdoor route to try and change the agreement, not actually to fix any problems in the protocol. So this has all led to a very fatal loss in credibility for the UK negotiation position. And it is certainly, not a good place to be when even, the Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Ministers of, the Republic of Ireland are saying the UK should not be trusted. I mean, your own neighbours saying you should not be trusted. I mean, that's just ouch. That's not a nice thing to have to say about your neighbours on a nation-state basis. So, and unfortunately, you can only look at those statements and see the frustration that they do not feel the UK is acting in good faith. And that is obvious, particularly with the claims made by Dominic Cummings, that the UK actually had a secret strategy of reneging on the Northern Ireland Protocol. That was Boris Johnson's strategy. So the whole UK position has actually been quite badly undermined by all these factors. And the inability to clearly articulate principles, that they're sticking to them, that they actually are abiding by them, and the fact that all this information had come out about their secret plan to renege on the protocol. So this is not looking good, and the EU would be justified in taking a very hard line. But they haven't. And this is very curious. They appear to have been extraordinarily generous in their proposals. So let's kind of dig down into it. I mean, are they? Are they really being generous? Have they really caved in to UK government demands? And to be honest, I really don't think they have. First, they stuck to their principle of no rewriting the protocol. And what they have proposed is amending the protocol, amending how you implement it, but not actually changing any of the principles or the core, the core substance of the protocol. So the EU position hasn't really changed. Generous as it appears, the fundamental, key red lines for them remain intact. They've also not proposing to remove the European Court of Justice. Now, this is going to be subject to more conversation. Lord Foster made that clear. But the EU have not moved from that, and that is crucial. That is a red line for them to protect the integrity of the single market. And you can understand why, because you can't really have any nation state or even elements of nation states operating within the single market, but operating to completely different laws and rules. You're either in or you're out. And that includes whether you're subject to the legal jurisdiction inherent in that market. So this will be key for the UK. And the trouble with for the EU, and the trouble is the UK has not really made any good argument about why the EU should abandon this principle. I know the UK may not like it, but that's a preference in a way, a strong UK preference, but it's not actually a winning argument. They say this is not fair argument rather than, this is how it undermines principles, how it undermines implementation of the agreement. But EU have done a few other interesting things. So they've demanded better visibility of the amount of trade flowing between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And in some ways, you can almost look upon this as infringing sovereignty. They want to know what is going on, and this could be commercially advantaged information, for example. But that's a key element of their demand. And the reason why the EU demanded that, because actually, I think the EU come to a realization with the protocol that they don't really care about the quantities of meat or medicines or any other thing, foodstuffs or whatever, going from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. And they honestly don't. Yes, they put the UK government in a very awkward position. It's always, perhaps from their perspective, it's fun to see them squirm. But when it comes down to what is important to the EU, stopping the flow of small stuff, food and medicine and so on, isn't actually something they want to do. They have a vested interest in. What they do have a vested interest in is significant flows of non-compliant or illegal goods through Northern Ireland into the single market. So to protect their interest, what matters to them, if they can see this data, they can see any significant increase in shipping of stuff that otherwise wouldn't be allowed into the single market. So by making this apparent concession, what they've actually done is shaped the protocol to better align with what are their true concerns, the true things they care about. The EU doesn't really want to have to put up with a whole load of paperwork just to track, the movement of steak from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, if that is indeed what's going on. It's irrelevant to them. But if several thousand tons worth of beef stuff is coming through Northern Ireland that they couldn't possibly eat and finding its way into the Republic of Ireland and maybe into France or Germany or whatever, then that is what they care about. That is what they want to see and stop. So really, their proposal, although meant to ease trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, actually works to their interest, to their advantage, not necessarily to Great Britain. And this is perhaps the key point, is if that's true, then what are the benefits for the UK government in terms of agreeing to this? Because actually, it depends what you believe the drivers of the UK negotiation position is. If you believe they're genuine and that they wish to reduce trade barriers between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, then what the EU proposed does exactly that, and they should be very happy. But I detect that perhaps they're going to string this out for a lot longer, because actually that may not be their true motivation. The true motivation may actually be the Brexit motivation, which is to undermine the protocol as much as possible. Not actually anything to do with trade. They just want to undermine the withdrawal agreement. They want to reduce its impact, its curtailment of what the UK government can do or decide to do. So essentially what the EU have done by making this proposal, they've quite badly undermined the UK position, because it's going to be very hard for the UK to counter-argue, again, 80% reduction in paperwork, for example. I mean, who doesn't like the sounds of that? So if you're going to make any arguments against that, you really need to prove that it's a fake, it's a fake proposal by the EU, for example. But I don't think the UK negotiators are going to do that very well. So they're going to end up focusing negotiations on all the other things that don't have any practical impact. And that's going to be a hard sell, and that's not going to put them in a good position. So what conclusions can we draw from this little exchange, or the furtherance of the whole Brexit story between the EU and the UK? Well, little substance has actually changed, in all honesty. And the EU is proposing what it wants, a tweak to the implementation of the protocol, not a substantial change to the protocol itself. The UK government position is a substantial change, but you can argue that that substantial change has less to do with the protocol and more to do with trying to change various elements of the withdrawal agreement and how it applies to the rest of Great Britain, not just to Northern Ireland. So the UK have resisted that idea or proposal, and we'll see where they get to. The UK has also been fatally undermined as a competitor. And talk about that in terms of trade deals, because the fact that all these revelations that the UK doesn't want to abide by a withdrawal agreement with the EU is very much political ammunition to anyone else in the EU, in fact, who might want to speak to the Chinese or the Indians or the Australians and say, you know what, you want to deal with us, you don't want to deal with those Brits, they're untrustworthy. And they've got plenty of ammunition they can use to support that messaging. So the UK, outside the EU, is trying to position itself as a competitor. And right now, the UK is not looking at all competitive. It's looking, fatally weak, in fact. The EU is definitely the stronger. The EU look like they've occupied the moral high ground in terms of trying to protect the protocol, because you certainly know that the US will be back in the EU's corner, not the UK's. And that's going to be significant. We'll see more on that soon, I'm sure. So what can the UK really do? Can they genuinely counter-argue against the EU's proposal? They're sort of backed into a corner that it looks like they're getting what they want in practical terms, but they're not getting what they want in more underhand political terms. So they've basically been outflanked by the EU yet again, as they have been throughout the entirety of this time. And this is all a matter of perception as well as substance. So of course, this is a political argument that's very much played in the public arena in a way that's never been before. Both sides will claim victory. But I don't think there can be really any argument that whatever the outcome of these negotiations, only one side is going to come out the stronger. And right now, that side is not the UK. So sorry for a bit of a longer video than usual, but this was interesting and I thought it was worth some in-depth analysis.